Welcome to the Happy in the Mess podcast. We are your hosts, Marlena, Cheri, and Matthew. We are therapists and coaches, and we want to share our own stories with you, as well as the wisdom, insights, and tips we've learned along the way. Thanks for tuning in to this episode.
Welcome back to Happy in the Mess. We are here with Matthew and Cheri, and today we're actually following up with a previous conversation we had around ADHD, which was really fascinating and helpful. So if you didn't catch that, please go back and listen to the ADHD episode, because we're going to talk today about strategies and interventions for ADHD. And there's a lot of noise out there around this. So Matthew's actually an expert in this area. So listen in, take notes, take us on a walk or in your car, and get ready to listen to some really helpful tips on how to manage adult ADHD in particular. And as a reminder, if you'd like to work with any of us, Cheri is the couples relationship coach, and you can find her link as well as Matthew's and mine, the spiritual dating coach, all in the description box. And this episode is really going to highlight the non-medication route. We will have some thoughts on medication, but we're here to talk about other things you can do other than medication. So listen in, especially if you are not someone who wants to continue with medication or get on it. And we'll start with first, there are people have all different kinds of jobs with ADHD, and I feel like some lend themselves better than others to this condition, this neurodiversity. I don't want to even call it an issue because it is a gift in a lot of ways. So what are some strategies for someone who, for example, is just a regular office worker who has ADHD? I feel like it's a bad combo, but you tell me, Matthew.
No, and it's a great point. Again, all of this with the caveat of this is a very individualized process. I've argued since grad school that ADHD really should be considered a spectrum disorder because it has a huge variety of presentations. And I think that's, as people are listening in, I'm assuming that the title grabbed you and that you probably think that you have some of these traits, or that your loved one has some of these traits, or maybe you even have that diagnosis. But please take all of this with a grain of salt, because everybody is so different in this. Going back to what you asked, Marlena, the office workers, there are people who will thrive with good structure and containment around what they do, expectations. There are ADHDers who love habits and doing the same thing every day. And then there are ones who are like, I will take a different route into work every day, and I will go up different sets of stairs just to mix things up. So knowing you and knowing where those stressors can really lie is part of it. So I think structuring your environment, structure it in the way that works for you. If you find yourself getting distracted by stuff, move the distractions. We were just sharing beforehand. I have a random can of helium sitting on my desk, and like, yeah, that's gonna periodically. I'm gonna grab this thing. I'm gonna very not appropriately take a breath of it. Don't do that. It's dangerous. But that's because the ADHD brain looks at it, thinks it does it all simultaneously. So structure that environment, structure your time. Don't be afraid to use do not disturbs. I always, especially highly sensitive ADHDers, I always say, like, put the sign up on the door, office hours, blah, 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 or keep the door closed. I knew somebody when I was teaching who would, at the end of the day, they had to stay there to finish up work, but would often get distracted. So he would go and shut the lights off in the room. And so people would walk by and just assume he's not there instead of coming in and talking. I'm him, by the way. So my apologies to any of my students who are listening to that, because yeah, I totally was hiding from you. So I think those are my general spots, for at least for as far as office workers might go. I don't know, Cheri, if you
What
have.
about,
Oh, wait,
yeah, go ahead, Cheri.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. All of those are excellent suggestions, and I deal with this more peripherally, so I don't know that I have many more to offer.
Well, I kind of wanted to follow up with that because some of these strategies could be used in perhaps other professions, but I'm thinking, the skilled labor, the manual labor, the service worker, even the student, like how can other people still thrive, whatever profession that they're in, and manage this because it seems like it could really be interfering with perhaps productivity and the ability to feel comfortable and like you're doing well.
And all of these come with their benefits and drawbacks. Like that's as I listen, my brain's going through all of these professions, all of these ways of doing things. I mean, some ADHDers, we thrive with mechanical stuff. We're very kinesthetic based knowledge learners, so we love to tinker and to tool. I'm working on sewing projects right now because it's too warm to be outside and do stuff. So, like I like to do things with my hands because that helps keep me grounded. That being said, if you have an electrician who's ADHD and they're zoning off in the middle of working with a 220 outlet, that could be very shocking at the end. Sorry, I'm a dad. It's required. So the jokes only get worse, I promise. But yeah, I mean, if you're a trade worker, right, just know where do you go off the road? Where are your weaknesses? Where are your strengths or your challenges? Or yeah, your struggles or your challenges. And then also like, what strengths do I build and lean into those? And it's going to look very different for everybody else. Students, we love to learn. I'm literally standing in piles of books. It looks like stinking Dumbledore's office in here. I mean, it's just like wizard stuff everywhere. And their therapy books and things like that. But at the same time, like we also struggle in academic environments. So learning how we learning how to do stuff. When I read books, I have to do something with that knowledge because if I don't, it's gone. So
I think this is where a lot of people end up in an entrepreneurial space. It's a place where they can structure the work, they can structure their day and the expectations to entirely fit them. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people will burn out in other jobs before they'll land in an entrepreneurial space. And that can come with some negative stigma. And I wish that were a door that were more obviously open from the beginning so that it doesn't feel like you land there after flaming out of other scenarios that don't fit very well. But the entrepreneurial space, then you have complete control over how you do the work and what work you choose to do, and doing it in a different way than other people actually gives you that edge to provide something new and something that might take off.
absolutely. That is truly one of the strengths with ADHD is that ability to think outside the box. Things they just don't look the same. One of my favorite stories is that the CEO of JetBlue, who is profoundly ADHD, and he's the one who invented the idea of the e-tickets that we all use as we get into the flying and stuff like that. For those of us who are jumping on planes and traveling to different countries and stuff like that. But somebody had to think of it. Like, and a lot of times it is that gifted creativity of the ADHD, or of like, I'm not going to follow the path of everybody else. Which yes, why we do make good entrepreneurs with the right guidelines in place. I definitely need my help, and I always look at trying to hire my executive. I would say I'm trying to hire my executive functioning skills because they're not all there clearly from conversation today. So because I'm everywhere.
So, following back up on how to manage it in different situations and settings, like I've had a couple of people in my life, this is of interest to me, who have really struggled with traditional schooling. Like you said, academics have been hard. So I was wondering if you could share maybe some, if someone wants to go that route, how can they get through well? What are some like specific things maybe a student could do, adult student, or even like a younger student, but we're really gearing our conversation here towards adults.
So yeah. Obviously you want to find things that interest you. And that's that challenge. Like ADHD, everybody gets frustrated with ADHDers because when they're focused and they want to do something, like grease lightning. We're just flying down the quarter mile. And when it's something we don't want to do, I don't know, we're like a dump truck. It's just like we're stuck. We don't go anywhere. So a lot of it's structure, what you do, um, how you do it. I was one who I would thrive on if I wrote papers. I forget tests. I would much rather write a paper any day. I still enjoy writing, because it lets me research stuff that actually interests me. Um, Probably one of my favorite techniques for students, though, in general, is the Pomodoro technique, which is, I believe that the term is actually tomato. But like the concept of the Pomodoro technique, and it's one that I use. I try to encourage other people to do it. Is you want to sit down and work on a task for a specific amount of time. It's a very time-based thing because ADHDers, we don't have a great sense of time. And we don't prioritize well either. So what I say is I'm going to work on X assignment and most of the beginners, they recommend about 20 minutes. I always say play around with your attention span. Some of us don't have a 20-minute attention span. Some of us, 20 minutes just gets us going. So, that might be a 30-minute or 40-minute, but you want to set that and then set a hard stop, take a 5-minute break. In that 5 minutes, you can do all the butterflies that came through your head, right? Like, I'm going to go to the bathroom, I'm going to grab a coffee, I'm going to check my email, I'm going to check Facebook, and you've got like that set amount of time. Set a timer. If it's audible, it's going to register a lot more. So you can do all your work, take that break, and then sit down and do it again. If you want to upgrade this one, make a check mark system. And that's going to give you more energy, more focus with it, because now I'm earning check marks. A lot of the neurotypical people, a lot of the neurotypical people, like may not appreciate the check marks as much, but I found that for a lot of us, like, think about the games we play. We get daily check-ins, we get stuff like that, and like, So anyway, I think that's probably, if you wanted one big overall thing for students, that was what I would maybe recommend.
I really like that idea of gamifying things. I think that there's a lot of reinforcement in that. The other thing that I would add is I've got 2 kids in college right now, and one has a really amazing advising department, and the other, not so much. And while you want a program that's going to let you use that creativity and really play to your strengths of how you learn, you also want the structure in place. Because my daughter, who is not getting very good advising, that's a chaotic system. And so she's trying to navigate through a system where she has to follow up again and again and again to get the basic needs met. Where my other daughter's in a system where that structure is already there, and then she only has to ask for something once or twice, and they follow through on it, and it falls in place. So don't go to a place that's going to add to the chaos. Like, don't go to a chaotic system and then hope that you're going to be able to navigate that. It's kind of a setup. It's a setup for my daughter who has good executive functioning, but you put anyone in there who has any struggles with that, and they're not going to be able to figure it out. I'm not sure that she's going to be able to figure it out there. So, like, really looking at that structure matters a lot.
Mm.
And then you can fight against it. And then you can fight against it, because you have to have those walls.
Yeah. Well, this goes back to, I'm glad you mentioned the executive functioning, because some of the strategies Matthew was mentioning made me think like, well, some of that might have been helpful for me as a student, and I consider myself neurotypical. So I'm wondering, how do you know if you really are ADHD, or if the strategies could, might work for you even if you aren't? If that makes sense. Like, how do you determine maybe I am on the cusp here with this?
So this is a really good question, and I'm going to have Matthew answer it in a minute. But really, being healthy is a core piece of everyone's health. So, like, exercise, healthy food, getting enough sleep, having routines, knowing how you operate in the world. Like that is really good advice for everyone. And then so then you can have these specific ones that help with ADHD, which is what Matthew keeps talking about. But it doesn't mean like a lot of these things just work because they work, not because they're specific to neurodiversity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't have to be a carpenter to use a hammer. It's a tool that's useful for many different situations and hopefully appropriate ones. So yes, I think if we have these struggles, a lot of times these techniques will work for a variety of people. ADHDers, and absolutely, going back to what you were saying, Cheri, one of the things in my own journey, as I was looking through things, I was looking at some of my genetic work, and I noticed that I have a particular gene abnormality that they are starting to link to ADHD style symptoms. And I don't want to speak too much on it because I'm still learning it myself. Um, but basically, that the idea is that we just don't break down the dopamine as effectively as somebody who is neurotypical. So I started looking up, like, okay, what supplements can I take for this? What can I do for, what are all these different additions that I can do? And all of the research led back to manage your stress, eat a balanced diet, exercise regularly. So it's the same tool that works. It's just even more effective for somebody who is in this particular struggle with things.
Mhm. So some of the strategies I'm hearing, or a lot of the strategies for ADHD are just general health and well-being for everyone. But then how do you determine if you might actually have it if you're not talking to a psychiatrist or a counselor? And yeah, because a lot of people discover this later on in life, especially in the absence of structure. They're like, oh, I don't do well. I'm
Mhm.
struggling with carrying out a task. But how do we know that's just not stress or burnout? Like, how do we determine that's actually ADHD?
The only way really is to, I think, to track it over time, to get a professional diagnosis, to walk through the symptoms. But I'm also going to hedge that one because I will say that we don't. Oh, we did a huge disservice with the new DSM when we got rid of originally it was ADD, ADHD, and then we just turned it into ADHD. Um, and I think instead of going the right way of exploring what some of these spectrum issues or spectra of issues, um, we almost went the wrong way of just kind of locking it into a certain diagnosis. Yeah, I don't think we understand it. I don't think it is as well explored within mental health, and that's maybe my encouragement to the APA and to other people as they're doing this is let's learn that because we do have some of us have social functioning skills that are lacking. Sometimes it's a physical brain chemistry kind of struggle with this that we don't understand because most of us have never measured our metabolism of dopamine and serotonin and some of these other chemicals that are really important to us. Um, so I guess maybe that's a big, long, divergent way of saying we don't really know, but we can know the effects, right? If I struggle with executive functioning, let me look at why. Is it burnout? Have I tried to apply the burnout techniques to it? Um, for ADHDers, I've noticed there's some really big commonalities in there. So I think a lot of times if we recognize those, we can work with them. One of my big ones is always out of sight, out of mind, which is good and bad, right? And when I see a lot of people like, I'm going to organize my room and I'm going to put everything in these big closed closets, those things are gone forever, right? Until the next time that you have this cleaning moment and you pull up in the drawer, you're like, oh, I totally forgot that I have that. There's a reason why I have 6 hammers on my toolbox, because we lose sight of it. I now have my workbench, and we're doing hammers today. Why not? On my workbench, I now have a place where my 6 hammers are hanging, so that I know to go there and grab those hammers. So that's that technique. Is it's insight. I'm going to see it, but it's also organized.
Mm. Yeah, so that's really helpful. I'm glad you brought up that specific, like out of sight, out of mind. Could you also share about, I know I've heard a lot about this on social media, but body doubling? Like, what
Hmm.
is that and when is it helpful?
Yep. Um, Body doubling it's something my wife and I actually used. Really one time in particular that totally stands out was I had a whole bunch of notes I had to do for work, get things caught up. She had to do some cleaning downstairs. She was not feeling it. I wasn't feeling it. And I was like, you know what? Let's both go down there. I'm going to sit on the couch, like the bump on the log that I am, and crank out these notes because that's what's needed. Um, you can work on the basement, and we set a timer. We exactly what I said with the Pomodoro, and in our case, we just set an hour timer because we knew we'd be able to kind of crank everything out in that time. And it ended up because we had the energy of each other, we had the accountability for each other. We both were focused. We did our work, and we got literally both of our tasks were done in an hour and a half, and we were able to have fun the rest of the day. So body doubling is having that person present with you to do a task. I know two of my favorite counselors that I follow actually set up some like co-working sessions where they get together on Friday when the schedule allows, and one of them's not doing other stuff, which is just a completely theoretical thing, and I'm not talking about anybody else on this call. But that's that example, right? Like we're body doubling because we're present with each other. We don't have to work on the same task, but we're working on whatever task we have.
Now,
Mhm.
body doubling is definitely one of my favorite tools because it's almost like we feed off of the energy of one another, and you want to get to the end and be able to say, "Hey, I got something done." So there's that extra incentive to stay focused. Even if I get off track and do something else, still at the end I can say, "Hey, look, I got something done."
So this is a great way to support a loved one if they have this, and you know that it would be, because I mean, again, it's as helpful for neurotypical people sometimes it is for others. Although um, I do want to say, like, sometimes it seems like maybe your loved one with ADHD is not paying attention because they're also fidgeting while they're listening. And I just want to be like remind people that people with ADHD may need movement when doing something that's sedentary. And that doesn't mean that they're not listening. But I'm curious, are there any other tips you would have for helping a loved one, not taking what they're doing personally, like as if they're not listening to you if they happen to be fidgeting? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. Do you have some comments on that?
Um, I, I'm I've got a few, and I think Cheri, with especially with you working with couples, I think this is probably a great area for you to weigh in on too. Because what you were saying, Marlena, like we have to accept that this person is the way they are, and really get to what our core insecurity is. If you're worried that I'm not paying attention to you because I'm fidgeting with the seam ripper off camera, then that's let's talk about it. Let's talk about what that is. And it's with ADHDers, it's usually the reverse of what we expect it to be. So if I'm really still, and I've had these moments, and I will apologize to my wife if she hears this, because I've had these moments where I am still and I'm looking right at her, and my brain is 3,000 miles away. And she knows it now. She'll look and she's like, "You're gone, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." Um, and it's not personal. It's the way we are. That's like getting mad at somebody because they can't reach the top shelf. I'm 5'4". There are very few houses outside of Hobbiton where I can reach the top shelf. Don't get mad at me for it. Like, let's just accept it, and we want to be able to work through a lot of that. Um, so that's one area, and the other one that I really wish people would understand is the eye contact. Um, ADHDers and a lot of neurodivergent people, we struggle with eye contact. It overwhelms us, sometimes even to that point of distraction. Um, and a lot of us were raised in this culture where if I'm looking at you, that means I'm paying attention. Um, Give space to that person. If they are not an eye contact person, it's okay, right? Use other forms of feedback. Are you listening to me? What did you hear me say? Um, to check and see. That way, all of our needs are being met. But don't expect them to be staring at you the whole time because that's really uncomfortable for some of us.
Mm, yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that because that's another one I think where couples may get annoyed with one another if they're not looking and being still or
Mm.
Cheri, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I love the idea of clarity and having an understanding. So what I mean by that is having a clear conversation about expectations and what you both expect is usually really helpful in bringing a couple onto the same page. Man, I have like examples like pinging in my head so fast because I've talked about this so often this week. I talked with a couple this week about what their goal was because they were getting really frustrated that they couldn't work together on a project. And when I started asking about what their goals were, they had two completely different goals. And so, of course, they were mad at each other because the other person wasn't working towards their goal, but it wasn't their goal. So, just having that clarity of what that goal is. I also worked with a couple this week. This is a conversation I have a lot with couples, and it was around the specifics of a ritual. So this there are points in our day when we interact with each other, and if you're not clear on what each person expects out of that, that can go really sideways. So, like one of those times is when you get home at the end of the day and who finds who and who initiates the connection and what that connection is going to include. Like this sounds like I'm breaking this down into like these little bitty pieces, but the clarity that it offers where both partners know what to expect in that exchange means that's going to stop going sideways. And one of the things that couples do a lot when, well, I'll just say all couples because I see this so often, not just in a neurotypical, neurodiverse relationship, but they'll say, well, if you loved me, you would know what I need right now. And that's just a setup for your partner to fail. And so a lot of the work that I do with couples is like bringing clarity to these situations, which helps both partners, no matter what their neurotypical neurodiverse status is, so that they stop just kind of blowing up these minor situations that then can run more smoothly. So Matthew, you'll have to weigh in on that because that's kind of my way of doing it, but I suspect that it works really well in that situation as well.
So many of us we have very rich fantasy lives. Whether, a lot of ADHDers are given to video gaming, reading books. Our heads are in the clouds. It tends to happen that way. But there's a predictability that happens within those because everything is, obviously it's scripted. No matter what entertainment form we use, even some of the reality TV stuff is still very, at least has scripting points to it. That being said, and I love what you said, right? Like in those times, we're kind of brought up with this mentality, like we know what the needs are because, oh, this person read my mind. No, they read the script. They didn't read a mind, like real life doesn't work that way. Real life is about, hey, this is what my needs are. Can you meet this? This is what I need from you. And there's a vulnerability with it. And man, we struggle with that sometimes because a lot of ADHDers are brought up with this idea that there's already something wrong with us. And if we worry about rejection from our partner, even a long-term partner, it can still it creates this cycle, right? I can't ask for what I need, but my needs aren't being met. Therefore, there's something wrong with me. And it creates a cycle of fights that ends up in couples counseling, hopefully, to be able to unpack that before too much damage has been done.
Yeah, I'll throw one more tip in there. It also is very helpful to, when you're trying to solve a problem, have a short, targeted conversation. Spend 10 minutes on that problem and then and then come back to it later and check and see if it worked. But don't try and have an hour and a half conversation that weaves all sorts of things into it when what you need is a specific problem solved.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Pomodoro technique, but
Yeah.
do it for couples, like let's just
Mm-hmm.
zero in on this one thing for this time period. It's great advice.
Mm-hmm. And again, it helps the neurotypical person as well stay on track and not go off on a tangent and like keep that, that not let turning that fire into a bonfire. So I'm glad you brought up the couples counseling. Like that is one of the healthier ways to start managing and coping should some of these issues start interfering in a relationship. But let's talk too about the ways that maybe some people are self-medicating for their ADHD that are not super healthy. What might those be, Matthew?
People in general, right? Not me in particular. No.
That's right.
Yeah.
People in general.
You know what? Keep in mind with ADHD, we don't have a lot of delayed gratification built in there. Our brains are not structured in a way in which delayed gratification works. So we go for whatever is quickest, most effective, and right at hand. Drug and alcohol abuse can play into that very quickly because those things do provide quick fixes. I already mentioned we do tend to be gamers. We tend to dissociate a lot. We'll hit social media and without calling out any platforms in particular, but when you have a whole series of videos that are tailor-made to your interests that go every 5 seconds, it's like that's a great way to get lost in it. Other adult subjects, I was debating whether or not pornography usage, even sometimes affairs, or yeah, there's a nicer way to say that, and I'm not having the words right now, so I'll let Cheri probably speak to that one a little bit more. But any of those immediate quick fixes, sugar is one of our biggest ones. Let me eat my feelings, and any of those things, again, quick fix, not great in the long term. Yeah.
Those impulsive, I mean, I would also include gambling in that potentially as well, or spending just in general, like buying toys, lots of toys. Yeah. Yeah, buying things that make you feel good, that you want. Caffeine. You didn't mention caffeine, but I think caffeine is
yeah.
probably one of them.
Yep. Energy
Instant
drinks.
gratification.
Yep.
Yep. So if you find yourself engaging in sort of these ways of self-medicating, what can you do when you want to have like instant gratification? What's a healthier way to channel some of this stuff?
I try to ask the question, and I try to put this in places where it's key as I'm working with people. If we're struggling with food, put this on the refrigerator, we're going to see it. If we're struggling with, if it's a computer issue, put it on your monitor. I literally have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to 12 Post-its on my monitors with notes on it so that they're in sight.
That's not distracting. I think
It is,
I would find that distracting. Yeah.
it is not. It's a reminder that's there. So, and yeah, some people do get distracted by it, but and that's why I said everybody's different. But having that reminder somewhere where it will interrupt at that key moment, and it's a very quick moment with ADHDers. If I use food as the example, I'm going to open up the fridge and be like, okay, what do I want? For me personally, it's the cheese drawer is going to get hit every time. So what I do is I put the pickles right in front of the cheese drawer, and that helps to interrupt that, because the key question in all of this is, what do I actually need right now? Right.
I love that question. What do I actually need?
And if I give myself that space, right? Am I actually hungry? No, I'm not hungry. I've got the munchies, right? Am I, using this adult entertainment to fit a need? Well, no, maybe I need to go to my spouse and talk to them about what that need actually is, instead of trying to do that on my own. Video game. I'm clearly not anti-video game, right? So the question might be like, what do I need? I need to decompress right now. So that's a good thing, right? What do I need right now? I need to do my schoolwork. Okay, now's not the time to play Starfield or whatever the game of the week is, So it goes back to and asking yourself that question. Take a deep breath, ground yourself, regulate yourself. What do I need?
How important is it Oh, and if you're liking this content, please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. We would love to hear from you. So please place your comments in the comment section, and so that we know what you're like and we can deliver more content to you like it. Um, Tell us, Matthew, how important is it to nurture creativity if you have neurodiversity and ADHD in particular?
Um, I would say I'm going with almost essential because it's key to who we are. And it's going to be different for everybody has a different creativity that's out there. Um, Stepping back, I think one of the things that we have struggled with in our culture, with the entertainment being as rampant as it is, we become consumers very easily. It's a very easy process to consume videos. We went through this with our son, where he was watching these Minecraft videos especially through the pandemic, when we were all trying to figure out what to do with life. And what we started doing was like, okay, he's interested, but what I told him to do is like go in and start doing these things in Minecraft instead of just watching the video of Phil doing all these things on his channel. Like, how about you go through and do some of that stuff? So even at a young age, we've tried to foster that, and he now plays drums and has all sorts of creative outlets. So I think knowing what that might be, whether it's music or art, trying to nudge out of the consumer mindset and how do I turn into a creator mindset, I think is so key, and it gives us value. It gives us really knowledge of what our strengths might be. It helps provide that self-esteem. So many ADHDers, their self-esteem is just in the toilet because we've been told so many times that we're wrong, broken, dumb, annoying, whatever it may be. And what we need is that positive feedback of like, no, we're awesome, beautiful, creative people on this planet.
Mm-hmm. And so, would you say, I know that we've tailored this whole conversation towards how to manage ADHD without medication, but would these same strategies still be applicable if you're on medication? And do you have any opinions you'd like to share about medication and ADHD?
Um, Research generally shows if there was a grid where we start taking medication, and they measured medication plus interventions, and it gave a very quick and positive, but for the most part, very quick and positive results. Without medication, the process was slower, but got to the same point roughly. So in general, all things kept equal, I think medications, they help provide that support, but we don't want to just rely on them alone. We have to have these other things in there. One of my challenges in working with this, and I've seen this in individuals where their ADHD is not managed, and they are these wonderful little forces of chaos. And sometimes we can tend to over medicate, and it kind of zombifies. And that one always hurts my heart a little bit because, like, I always know there's got to be just someplace in between where we can still nurture that creative person, but still get the help they need in that process. So yeah, I'm not anti-medication. I think research shows that there are some good ones out there, but we do want to watch some of the side effects, especially with the stimulant meds. If the individual's tending towards cardiac problems, we don't want to throw extra stims on there and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And being aware of the effects on appetite and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the side effects can be pretty disruptive
Yeah.
when you've already got problems with sleep or with appetite, and then you throw that on top.
Yep.
Yeah, and someone who works in the substance abuse field, like I would just encourage our listeners to not self-medicate, even with a prescribed medication such as this. If you're not prescribed it, do not take it, and please talk to a medical professional about,
Please.
yeah, dosages and whatnot. It's never a good idea to self-medicate, even if it's for your condition. So, and some of those ADHD medications are addictive. And people do end up in rehab for problems related to these particular medications. So please, if you're considering medication, talk to someone qualified who knows about that. I appreciate everything you've shared here today. There's been a lot and so much more that we could talk about around how to like manage it, and work with your ADHD. and let it work for you rather than against you. But we are out of time. So again, like, share, subscribe if you've appreciated this content, want to hear more like it. We'd love to comment on it. And tune in next week for our next episode where we'll be talking more about mental health disorders in particular and our thoughts on it as professionals. But thank you for listening in.